It started like a dream. I had just closed on my new lakefront cabin, a peaceful retreat surrounded by towering pines, water so still it looked like glass, and the kind of silence that cities can't imitate. After a decade of grinding through 16-hour workdays building my tech startup from nothing, I was finally cashing in on some peace. Or so I thought. What I didn't expect was the nightmare wrapped in yoga pants and entitlement that came knocking on my cabin door within 48 hours of moving in. Her name was Karen. Yes, that kind of Karen. Platinum blonde hair tied in a bun so tight it looked painful, oversized sunglasses she wore even when it was cloudy, and a scowl permanently stamped on her face like it was custom printed. She introduced herself without a smile, arms crossed, standing just far enough to not look friendly. "You're not supposed to be here," she said bluntly. No hello, no welcome, just attitude. I blinked. "Excuse me? This is a private HOA community. Vacationers aren't allowed long-term. You'll need to leave or file temporary guest permits with the HOA board." Now, I knew this area had an HOA, but my cabin wasn't part of it. That was made very clear when I bought the property. My land was adjacent to the HOA complex. I was private, off-grid, and outside their jurisdiction. I told her that politely. Karen didn't like that answer. She puffed up like a peacock and said, "I'm the president of the Lakeshore HOA, and if you don't file the paperwork, I'll be forced to report you. We have rules here." "I understand that," I said calmly, "but I'm not in your HOA. My property isn't covered by your association." She squinted at me, as if I'd just spoken Latin. "I'll be checking with the county," she snapped and stormed off. I chuckled. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I was sipping coffee on the porch when a sheriff's cruiser rolled up my gravel driveway. Two deputies stepped out. My stomach dropped, but I played it cool. "Morning," one said. "We got a call from a concerned resident that someone might be squatting out here." Squatting? Seriously? I laughed and handed over my ID and the property deed. They were respectful, probably annoyed they were called out here for something so dumb. Within 10 minutes, they were apologizing and heading back down the road. Later that afternoon, guess who I saw marching around the perimeter of my cabin, phone in hand, snapping pictures? Karen. That's when I realized this wasn't just HOA drama. This woman had declared war. She started harassing my contractors. When I brought in a crew to fix the dock, she parked her car in front of the worksite and accused them of damaging HOA-owned land. It wasn't. When I installed a simple security camera, she stood in front of it for 27 minutes, waving a clipboard and shouting about surveillance violations. She even tried to organize a petition to block my road access, claiming my presence was ruining the neighborhood's aesthetic. This was escalating fast, and I wasn't about to be bullied off my own land. So I did some digging. Turns out, Karen's HOA complex was a mess. Financially, legally, logistically, years of mismanagement had left the HOA board bankrupt and desperate. Several owners were delinquent on dues. Their clubhouse had code violations. The roads were in disrepair. And then I discovered the jackpot. One of the HOA's largest debts was tied to a land lease. A 20-acre parcel the HOA had been renting for shared use, trails, a park, some guest parking, and utility access. The lease was up for sale. And the seller? An old friend of mine from college. Long story short, I made a few phone calls, put in a generous offer. Within 2 weeks, I owned the 20 acres that propped up Karen's entire HOA. Oh, but it gets better. Once I had the land, I started reviewing easement agreements. Turns out the HOA's water and sewer lines ran through my new property. Their access roads? Also mine. Even their beloved private trail was on my land. Karen didn't find out immediately. I let her keep barking for another week. She crossed the line when she trespassed again and left a notice on my door threatening legal action. That was my final straw. The next morning, I sent a formal letter to the HOA board. Effective immediately, they would need to renegotiate their access leases. With me. And until agreements were signed, those areas were off limits. The fallout was nuclear. Karen showed up screaming on my property like a banshee. "You can't do this. This is illegal. You're a fraud." I calmly handed her the paperwork showing I now owned the land her HOA depended on. The blood drained from her face. She tried to argue, but it was useless. Karen, I said, I'm not in your HOA, I never was. But now, I'm your landlord. She stormed off again, but this time there was no confidence in her stride, just panic. Over the next month, the HOA board tried to scramble together emergency meetings. I offered fair terms, lower lease rates than the last owner. I didn't want to punish the other residents. They weren't the problem. Karen, however, refused every proposal. She rallied a few of her cronies, tried to smear my name in their little community newsletter, and even attempted to block the lease vote. But the residents turned on her. They were tired of her antics, tired of the power trips, tired of her being the reason their water bills were at risk of doubling. Eventually, they voted her off the board. That's right, she was fired. And guess who they elected as the new HOA president? No, not me. I declined. But they picked a reasonable guy named Mark, a retired firefighter who immediately restored sanity to the community. Karen, meanwhile, moved out 3 months later. Rumor has it she tried to sue me but found no lawyer willing to take the case. She sold her house at a loss, and the last I heard, she was trying to start an HOA free living Facebook group somewhere in Florida. The irony. Now, my cabin is peaceful again. The neighborhood's friendlier than ever. Mark and I chat sometimes over beer by the lake. I even donated materials to fix their roads. But I never forgot what this started as. A woman who thought she could bully a stranger out of his home with a clipboard and a phone call. She didn't know I'd already built an empire from scratch. She didn't know I had receipts, resources, and real estate lawyers on speed dial. She didn't know that the man she tried to chase off was the one who would end up owning the ground beneath her feet. So next time someone tells you, you can't live here, or you don't belong, just smile. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply owning the land they walk on and letting them trip over their own rules.